Usually, when you think of old laptops, you think of quite hefty, bulky slabs of plastic, circuits, and whatnot. Take, for instance, old IBM ThinkPads. Well into the 2000s, IBM's design still managed to measure at around 1.5 inches thick. And I think the ThinkPad 600 from 1998 is a good example. It's a desktop replacement laptop that is quite hefty. So how did Panasonic fit essentially the same processor and a similar graphics chip into a smaller package? This laptop is from 1998, and how did I get my hands on something with a Japanese keyboard layout? Those are some great questions, so let's get started. Now, as to what this thing is, it's a Panasonic Let's Note CF-S51 from around late 1998 or early 1999. And this laptop was exclusive to Japan, meaning that for a first, I'm looking at a PC from a different region. Now, for some context, we need to look at the early days of personal computing in Japan. It took a bit of time for the IBM PC and its compatibles and clones to really take off in Japan, and this was due in part to the NEC PC-98, a domestic platform that, like other domestic platforms in Japan, were quite popular. The PC-98, though, was the most successful of these, and it was also quite locked down in that NEC wasn't having it if anybody was gonna make clones. However, the PC-98 was, in fact, based off of x86 components used by the IBM PC and its compatibles. And so, when Windows started to take off, it essentially started to mark the end for the PC-98, as essentially there was not much of a difference between running Windows software on a PC-98 and running Windows software on a PC compatible. This was definitely clear when Windows 95 came around. While Japanese manufacturers could do well overseas, such as Toshiba and Epson, the possibilities in the domestic market were essentially opened wide once Windows 95 came out. Sony, for example, created the Vaio, something I hope I can look at someday. And with Panasonic, they created two laptop models. For the worldwide market, they introduced the Toughbook, a series of rugged laptops that a lot of creators tend to really put through their test. And for the professional and personal market, Panasonic offered the Let's Note, specifically in Japan. Introduced in June of 1996 with the ALN1 model, the Let's Note is not very well documented with its early days. And this leads us to November of 1998 when Panasonic introduced the Let's Note CF-S51. Now, this isn't a very well documented model. Again, as I said, the Let's Note in its early days was not very well documented. However, on the Japanese Wikipedia, there is a specific detail. This model has been replaced by a ThinkPad, which may sound kind of odd, but what I think this is trying to imply is that this model introduced a trackpad. Prior to this, it seemed Panasonic Let's Note models used optical trackballs, and this one did not. It also didn't last too much long, being replaced in August of 1999. Now, while I said that there isn't too much information that is available on this, I was able to find somebody's review of the Panasonic Let's Note CF-S51 from back in the day. And it does also from this suggest that there was more information about this laptop online at some point, but stuff that might not be easy to access these days. The reviewer said that this laptop would have cost roughly $4,000 with Windows 98 and both Japanese and English manuals, and that for the time, it was a relatively well-performing laptop, housing a Pentium II and being arguably the lightest laptop to offer good performance. So, how does this laptop hold up? Now, as for how I got my hands on this PC, the backstory is relatively simple. I bought it at VCF East. I've been wanting to make a video on my VCF East trip for a while, but to no avail. Design-wise, the CF-S51 has a two-tone design, with most of the system being black and the external lid having a brushed metal look, which I can confirm by the feel of it is metal. You also probably have noticed that this laptop is quite thin for late 1998. While not the thinnest laptop from the time, it rivals newer laptops in depth. For comparison, it is about as thick as the C programming language 2nd edition by Brian Kernighan and Dennis Ritchie, a book designed to not be as big as, to quote the book, C is not a very big language and is not described well by a big book. With features on the front, there's a status LEDs and a display latch. On the right hand side, there's a PC card slot, the power switch, and the Kensington lock. The rear isn't of much note as it only houses the battery, and on the left hand side, there's the AC port, a docking port, one USB port, blocked off Ethernet, an infrared port, and headphone and microphone jacks. With how small this thing is, it's not too much of a surprise that there's a lack of some ports such as serial or external display ports, as well as a lack of either an optical or floppy drive. With the keyboard, it is a typical JIS QWERTY keyboard. It is a bit different from a standard US or Canada or British QWERTY keyboard and houses more characters. For instance, the @ sign has its own key, while the quotation mark is in its normal place place on other QWERTY keyboards. Japanese keyboards are mainly designed to fit the characters used in its writing system, namely hiragana. For some brief context, Japan's writing system uses 3 sets of characters: kanji, a traditional system derived from Chinese writing scripts; hiragana, which is used by default for syllables and for native words without kanji representation; and katakana, used for foreign-derived words, among other use cases. Typing on the keyboard is somewhat mushy, and it can be small and thus difficult for even someone like me, but it is possible to get used to provided you use a laptop like this for long enough. I should add that I did previously daily drive this laptop for a few days, and that time span was enough to get used to. As previously mentioned, this laptop has a trackpad and it is quite small. Overall, it isn't the worst, but it can be a bit finicky or stiff, something I have noticed on many old laptop trackpads. So I think with that, let's now power this thing on and see what it's like. Now, unfortunately, I don't have the original installation of Windows, presuming it came with Windows, and how sparse information is on this laptop today, I'm doubtful I'd come across its recovery media. Instead, there's an English copy of Windows 98 SE installed with all of the drivers and patches installed. Another thing you've probably noticed here is these display issues. To put it simply, there's a line and a bright spot, likely the result of whatever caused these dents on the lid. Another issue is that occasionally, on a cold boot, this PC will hang on logon after reporting error code 280 in the BIOS. While I initially presumed that this was related to device initialization, a web search says that this is for an incomplete boot and that the default BIOS settings have been loaded. This PC, as you will see, has an issue with hangs and lockups, so I can't be 100% sure if this error is fully related to that. Outside of that, it's a fairly decent Windows 98 PC, at least for basic tasks. This laptop has a 266 MHz Intel Pentium II, 96 megabytes of some kind of RAM, presumably SD RAM if we're going off of similarities to the ThinkPad 600, an InnoDisk ICF9000 industrial CF card, and a NeoMagic MagicMedia 256AV graphics chip. In addition, there's also a Yamaha OPL3 SAX audio chip for onboard audio, which produces basic sound from MIDI alongside a reasonable output for more advanced sound, such as Windows 98's system sounds. With software, I have quite a bit installed. For example, Microsoft Office 97 and Adobe Photoshop 5. For a Photoshop resizing test, it is definitely slower than the Compaq Evo D500 when resizing an image by 10 times the original size. I used the same Beagle picture, and it took roughly 3 minutes and 15 seconds to resize. But what about a more formal test? Well, I was going to choose 3D Mark 99 Max for benchmarking, until it gave me an error about a lack of DirectX 6 compatibility, which is odd providing some of the games that I'm going to be looking at. The NeoMagic MagicMedia 256AV, as it turns out, doesn't have that good of DirectX support, and its Direct 3D support is non-existent. While I could have used Quake or looked at another benchmark such as Final Reality, I was also away from home on a trip when I recorded this video, and I didn't think much of using Quake for benchmarking. Speaking of games like Quake, how is gaming performance on this thing? To start off, I'm going for a first for this channel, Duke Nukem 3D. Its configuration settings are also vast and provide comprehensive audio testing. And while the controls were arguably subpar on this keyboard, nor have I ever tried this game before, it wasn't performing that bad. In fact, it was performing fairly decent. That being said, Duke Nukem 3D's 3D capabilities are relatively basic. It's more comparable to Doom. So for another FPS title, I've opted for Quake. While it was somewhat difficult to remember the controls at first, I did get the hang of them relatively quickly. And this game did put some more stress on the processor. Thermally, it was still perfectly fine, but it was warmer than the previous game. Likewise, with Duke Nukem 3D, I don't have much to say, since this game was holding up perfectly fine. Moving on to another game, Bejeweled. And this game definitely put some stress on this PC. It is noticeably laggy, for one thing, and on top of that, it makes the fans run essentially non-stop, which is obviously a good start. I was able to get a long-lasting session here, despite me not wanting a long-lasting session, but the cherry on top was when I closed out the game when this happened. Yes, the PC literally froze and hung the second I closed out of the game. That's something. Moving on to something I don't think should be too difficult to run, Age of Empires. At least I thought it wouldn't be too difficult to run, because in reality, it also froze up, this time mid-game while I was in a deathmatch. I think you're starting to notice a theme here. So how about something that is very basic? I doubt SimCity 3000 will have any issues, and while it took time to load, it didn't have issues. Gameplay on this game was perfectly fine, and I was able to create zones and whatnot on a pre-existing map. While laggy, I generally expected that for SimCity based off of what I said about SimCity 4 being laggy on some period correct hardware in my eMachines T3304 video. At least SimCity 3000 is playable. And last but not least, I was very curious if Need for Speed 2 SE would work, and it does run. It is also surprisingly playable. I chose a McLaren F1 here and the default testing grounds map, and it isn't too laggy, and I could complete a few laps. This was albeit in a time trial, so I don't know if any other stuff like a normal race would be different, but it's at least playable in the way that I can enjoy the game. And with gaming, I don't have too much more, so that's going to be that. So to conclude, the Panasonic Let's Note CF-S51 is a fairly decent laptop for basic tasks, like Microsoft Office. It has a solid Yamaha sound chip and a Pentium II, but lackluster graphics with subpar DirectX support. It is by no means ideal for gaming, as its gaming capabilities are spread out among period correct games, with some being fairly playable while others completely crashing the thing. However, it may have potential for older DOS era games, although that can be said for most Windows 98 era hardware. When it comes to design, it looks surprisingly modern and thin for its time. Unfortunately, it's kind of compromised in other areas like graphics performance and optical drives. And it's also somewhat of a shame mine has this issue where it freezes up if left unattended for too long or if it's subject to DirectX games for too long, since it otherwise would be a fairly decent Windows 98 PC on the go. Anyway, on that note, what kind of laptop do you think would be ideal for Windows 98? Did you have a Panasonic Let's Note back in the day? If so, what's your thoughts on it? Do you also have this kind of laptop? Do you think I should look at the ThinkPad 600 I kept bringing up? Did you enjoy this video, or is there something I forgot to address, or something I could do to improve my content? If you have anything to say, feel free to let me know down below in the comments, through my Discord server, or through my email, and feel free to give this video a like. But that's about it for this video, so thanks for watching and have a nice day.